Artists of all types love to complain about business. And we love to say, terrible at marketing, I hate business, I don't understand it. We see it all the time. And I realized what I needed to do was approach business the way I approach writing. I approach writing with a sense of curiosity and wonder and play. And I thought, what happens if I apply curiosity to business? Right? That's a massive mindset shift. Rather than being a puppy pulling against a leash, I'm a puppy saying, oh, let's explore this thing.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 356 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with T Thorn Coyle. T Thorn Coyle is the author of books in the following series: The Witches of Portland, The Pride Street Paranormal Cozy Mysteries, The Panther Chronicles, and more. Thorn's multiple non-fiction books include Sigil Magic for Writers, Crafting a Daily Practice, and Kissing the Limitless, among many more. Thorn and I had a great chat about their forthcoming book and the brand spanking new Kickstarter for the Midlist Indie Author Mindset. Now, the Kickstarter, which funded in just a couple of hours and is already at more than twice its goal, is ranked as a Kickstarter project we love, and it runs until May 7th. Thorn and I talk about the new Kickstarter, multiple income streams for writers, just how critical the Midlist Indie Author Mindset can be, the value of community versus marketing and social media, their fiction and non-fiction writing, and so much more. It's a great chat, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor.
Ready to elevate your writing career? Join the Cruising Writers Group Sailing the Caribbean from Galveston on February 22nd to March 1st, 2025. This time, we're focused on indie authors, with special guests Mark Leslie and Erin Wright leading a deep dive into the world of self-publishing. You'll come away with invaluable insights, but also great memories as you connect with other writers and explore charming ports of call in Roatan, Honduras, Costa Maya, Mexico, and Cozumel. Visit cruisingwriters.com to book your spot today.
That's right, this episode's sponsor is Cruising Writers, and I am thrilled, absolutely ecstatic that I'm going to be one of the featured speakers on that cruise in 2025. Yes, getting me away from the cold and the snow in mid-northern Ontario, or southern Ontario where I live, I should say, and just enjoying some time on a ship with writers, just cruising along with writers. It's going to be so much fun. And so the sponsor of the podcast helps pay for hosting fees, etc., but the patrons who support this podcast support my time in producing the show. And I really value my patrons and want to say a huge shout out to everyone who supports this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. And as I like to do for my patrons once in a while, a happy surprise. And it's related to Thorn's Kickstarter. So I was so pumped, so excited. I did get a sneak peek at the book Thorn sent to me before we did the interview, but I really want to get that physical copy of the book in my hand, so I jumped right in there and was one of the first supporters. And then I saw that they were so close to their goal, and I was like, well, I'm gonna put them over the top. Just want to do it right now, really quickly. And I went in and I thought, I'm gonna do something for my awesome patrons because I love you guys so much and I appreciate your support. And I went and I purchased one of the consults with Thorn. And when that becomes available, I'm gonna do a random draw for my one of my patrons. Just gonna randomly offer it to one of you guys, and I think it'd be great because Thorn is a brilliant writer, a brilliant mind. I love conversations with Thorn because Thorn makes me think about things, makes me think deeper, and reminds me of the value of the way we approach things. And you heard it in the clip at the beginning, and you're going to hear more about it, and of course I'm going to reflect on it at the end. But so that is for the patrons. You'll be getting access to, and again, what I do is I put the patrons in a draw. I randomly draw. I put everyone in the sheet randomly, do random.org number generation, and then I'll contact whoever the winner is. And sometimes it does happen where the winner says, that's great, or I already have it, or whatever. That maybe they already sported that. They wanted that from the Kickstarter, and they wanted to make sure they got it. And they allow me to pass it on to the next person. And I've done that. And that just shows, again, the generosity of that amazing community. So, again, thank you to all my patrons who support this podcast at patreon.com/starkreflection. You are an awesome community. And my entire listenership is an awesome community. I am flabbergasted. I'm migrating, by the way, into my personal update here. But I'm constantly flabbergasted when people say, "Oh, I listen to your podcast," or "I'm regular listening to your podcast," because honestly, it is like writing, as I'm sure you all know. It is it's a solo endeavor. Yeah, I get to talk to really awesome people and I get to interview them. But when I spend several hours every week editing the podcast and doing that, that's all by myself. I'm doing it all by my lonesome. And it feels, I'm sitting here talking. Indy's sleeping. The dog, the Golden, is sleeping off to the corner. He's not even, I put him to sleep. So maybe I'm assuming that I'm going to put everyone to sleep. But anyways, so when I hear from folks, it means the world to me. And it reminds me that this is really part of a community and a conversation, which is why I really enjoy the comments from recent episodes. I'm gonna skip comments for this week, but thank you guys for your excellent comments. Although, no, actually, a couple comments I do have to address. One of my awesome listeners reached out to let me know I made a verbal typo in my personal update last week. And I'm going to Writers of the Future next week, and I got the little invitation here. And this is for the 40th anniversary of Writers of the Future, etc., etc. And it's being held at the Taglian Complex. I hope I pronounced that properly. And I think I said that's where the Academy Awards were held there. It's not. But the NAACP, the Daytime Beauty Awards, the Hollywood Critics Association Awards, the African American Film Critics Association, and the Living Legends Foundation Awards are regularly held in that building. So my mistake, and I appreciate that. No, when I make those errors, I do want to make sure I correct them because I guess when I was talking to one of the organizers, I misheard and probably misheard, Daytime Beauty Awards or whatever, and assumed Academy. I don't know. Maybe because I don't watch these things because I don't have a TV. I mean, I do have streaming and I do enjoy my streaming. But anyways, so I do appreciate that. That's really awesome when folks remind me of those things. Only other personal update is finally Only Monsters in the Building has finally been released. It came out today as I'm recording this, Thursday, April 18th, 2023. I've done some fun videos, tried to put together some fun videos, because I usually don't make a big deal at all about a book launch. I'm just usually on to the next 10 projects. And I do have so many projects waiting in the queue, including a short story I just finished this morning that I have to get off to a market because the deadline's in a couple days. And there's another short story I'm going to want to get to, and I think I have till the end of the month for that one. So a couple things there. And then I have so many other book projects as well. And yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Also, I got my cover designer to do the cover for the next Canadian werewolf book, which is Michael returns to Canada to trace his roots and find out a mystery from his past. And it is called A Canadian Werewolf in London, Ontario. So just like the first book was a play off of An American Werewolf in London, I thought I would bring Michael back home, and why not? I couldn't resist. London, Ontario is just a few hours drive from where I am here. So great excuse for me to get out there and do some research. A friend of mine, daughter goes to Western University in London, so they promised me a tour, which will be a lot of fun. And I do remember Liz and I spending a weekend there just so we could explore all the breweries, because it's too far to drive, and we wanted to be, having some drinks. We wanted to be responsible, so we stayed overnight there. So it'll be great to go back and explore and see what other brewish places are there. All part of research, of course, serious research in this writer's life. So that is it for my personal update, but I do appreciate comments, and I love hearing what you're thinking about when you are listening to the episodes. And I know it's difficult, because when I listen to podcasts in the car or going for a run or whatever, I often think about how I want to comment, and something comes to my mind, and then 5 million other things come to my mind by the time I get back home and I'm in front of my computer, because I'm an old guy doing things on, my thumbs on the little phone machine thing that I have in my hands is not necessarily my natural thing to do. Yes, I'm 54 years old, so there you go. That I do appreciate the comments, the emails, etc. from you guys, because again, and even when folks let me know that they listen to the podcast, it really does remind me of that awesome community that we have together, that we are part of this community, and I'm so honored to have you in that community with me. So that is it for the introductory matter. I'm going to roll the bumper, and we're going to get into my interview with T Thorn Coyle. Hey Thorn, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, it's been so long since we've had the chance to hang out together or even talk, so I'm so excited to get caught up on writing. So before we get caught up on stuff, for any of my listeners who are not familiar with you, what's a bit of a background about, the kind of stuff you write and how you got into writing in the first place?
Well, getting into writing in the first place, I was probably 5 years old, like many writers, right? But I had quite a journey. I wrote poetry, I wrote journalism, I wrote plays. I tortured fiction in my 20s. I would do the rewriting the short story forever, stalling out in the middle of novels, kind of another typical thing. I finally gave up on fiction, pivoted to nonfiction. I have 3 traditional publishing contracts with nonfiction. And then one day, a couple characters showed up and knocked on the door, and I went, oh, I guess fiction's back. And so then I started writing fiction again and really buckled down. So that was around 2017, 2018. I started with the indie publishing of fiction. I write mostly fantasy tinged fiction. So urban fantasy, action adventure fantasy, cozy paranormal mysteries, which are my current workhorse genres. And then I also still write nonfiction, mostly on spiritual practice. Although, as we'll talk about today, I just wrote my first writing business book.
Yeah, well, can I go back to those first 3 books? Were they spiritual practice books?
Yes.
And are they still available? Are they available?
They are still available. Yeah.
Okay.
So the first one is Evolutionary Witchcraft, then Kissing the Limitless, and Make Magic of Your Life. Those are my 3 traditional published books. And since then, since I started indie publishing, I now have more spiritual practice titles that I've indie published.
Oh, so you've got indie published spiritual titles and trad published spiritual titles as well.
I do.
So are they under the same name?
Yes.
Cool. So that because I can imagine there may be a crossover audience, especially because it's magic tinged fiction.
There definitely is. When I started writing fiction, everyone said, get a pen name, you're going to pollute your also bots, etc. And I was like, I spent up decades building this good name, and I don't want to serve the algorithm.
Yeah.
And of course, since then, the also bots are gone. The algorithm changes every 6 months anyway. My fiction far overtook my nonfiction pretty quickly.
Really?
In search. So it didn't matter. I'm glad I stuck with my name. And the other thing I did, which has been helpful, is my author tagline is magic is real and justice is worth fighting for.
Mm.
And that weaves through all of my work, my essays, my fiction, my nonfiction. All my work really centers around magic is real, justice is worth fighting for.
Oh, that is perfect. I love that because I was going to ask. I said, obviously there's that crossover, but I can imagine that the spirituality is something that is infused in your fiction as well, right?
It definitely is. People often say that they appreciate that the magic in my books feels real. It doesn't feel like Hollywood magic.
Ah,
It feels more grounded, like something ordinary people would actually do, as a practice,
yeah,
which I appreciate. The funny thing is some of the comments I've gotten on some of my novels, especially the Witches of Portland series, is that the things that feel false to some people is the political activism, which cracks me up because all the political activism in that series is also based on real
yeah.
events. I'm just
Imagine
like,
that,
you're
eh?
you're just out of touch.
Imagine that. I mean, I remember reading some of your short fiction set in that area, and I think it was in that realm, in that universe.
Yeah,
I love the city and miss having been there in too many years. But
yeah.
it does have a feel. It does have a magical feel to it. Or is that just me?
I think it depends on what your sensibility is. I feel the magic here, but I can find magic anywhere.
Yeah.
It's part of my life. I love going on walks and just engaging with the world around me. And
Yes,
yeah,
nothing. There is something really special about that. I find going on long walks, particularly walks in different landscapes than the ones I see on
yep,
a day-to-day basis. We have a lot of great green spaces around the city.
yeah,
I just come back so charged and ready to
yep.
go. And oh my God, so many great walking places in Portland too.
Oh, yeah. It's a terrific walking city. Every neighborhood is kind of its own little village, which I
Yeah.
really appreciate. I lived in San Francisco for decades and it was similar, right? Every neighborhood is its
Yeah.
own space. And walking from one neighborhood to the next, you feel the shift in the businesses, the
Right.
people, the trees. Yeah, I really dig that.
There's magic that can happen in urban landscapes as well. Liz and I do a lot of walking when we travel, and I remember the day we spent wandering through Brooklyn and all of the different because the different neighborhoods and the different
Yeah.
feels, like and when you think about it, it's like, oh, Brooklyn, it's this thing. But no, Brooklyn's this gigantic
Yes.
bunch of
Yes.
microcosms all connected.
Yes.
So I think you can find that in almost any urban center, right?
You totally can. And some of the fiction I loved when I was younger was from Canadian author Charles DeLint,
Oh,
who
yes.
wrote about magic in cities. I
Yeah.
was like, this is what I love. I love that you're walking down the street and you don't know what's just around the corner.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
know who's going to appear, what event is going to happen. And I love that sense of wonder and anticipation
Right.
in
Right.
something that's just ordinary life.
Yeah, no, it's funny you should mention Delint because my first experience outside of the very small town I grew up in mid-northern Ontario was going to Ottawa, which is a lot of his fantastical fiction is based loosely on some of the areas of Ottawa. So it was magic to me in two different ways. It was through his fiction and being in a place that I knew where I knew he grew up and lived, but it was also the magic of me being able to see things about the world that I had not in my very limited
Yeah.
small town views.
Yeah. He is a master at that, which I
Yeah, yeah.
appreciate.
Awesome. Now, speaking of masters, I wanted to talk to you most excitedly about a forthcoming Kickstarter that you're going to be launching because you teased us a little bit earlier before I dragged you back into the first books, but you're coming back into nonfiction, and this time you're leveraging a whole bunch of your knowledge and insights and experience to help other writers.
Yes. So I have written a book called The Midlist Indie Author Mindset.
Ooh.
So I built my fiction career during some of the most challenging years of my adult life. A lot of upheaval, a lot of change, illness, a brain injury, parent dying, all sorts of things. And I thought if I could build a career and be making a middle class living under these conditions anyone can do it,
Okay.
right? And I thought, I want to share this information. And most of it I realized was mindset, because what happened for me, you know, artists of all types love to complain about business. And we love to say, terrible at marketing. I hate business. I don't understand it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we see it all the time. And I realized what I needed to do was approach business the way I approach writing. I approach writing with a sense of curiosity
Hmm.
and wonder and play. And I thought, what happens if I apply curiosity to business? Right? That's a massive mindset shift. Rather than being a puppy pulling against a leash, I'm a puppy saying, "Oh, let's explore this thing. What can I learn about this? How can I study this other facet?" Right?
Hmm.
So I began studying every day. I began researching every day and then figuring out what worked for me. Now, part of that came from the fact that early on in revisiting fiction and launching my indie fiction career, I was listening to people whose methods were never going to work for me. And I was paying for expensive courses. I was trying to run ads the way they ran ads. I was rapid releasing. I was in KU for 6 months. You know, it worked fine, but it wasn't my style,
Right.
right? So I had to back up, retrench, and figure out what works for me, because only in finding out what works for me in my career am I going to have a sustainable long-term career,
Right.
right? So many people get on a hamster wheel of one form or another and burn out and leave. And I didn't want that. Besides which, I want to enjoy my life, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
I don't want to work 7 12-hour days a week,
No,
you
no,
know.
this is something you want to enjoy. I want to go back to the concept of the curiosity, because
Yeah,
that is a complete different mindset change, right? Because you think, okay, it's business, I got to take it very seriously. I got to study this, I got to understand, I got to analyze, I got to do this. But you're approaching it with the same fascination that you approach characters in store, like the characters who walked up to your door and said, "Hey, Thorn, now listen, come here with us. We got to show you
exactly.
something," right? So,
Exactly.
the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly the same. And that curiosity brings a lightness to business. And so then I stay engaged with it. I find ways to become interested rather than say, this is repellent to me or it's too hard. Now, some things actually are too hard for me, but I need to figure that out by engaging and being curious first. You know, with my brain injury aftermath, for example, there are some things that it's just going to take all of my brain power and it's going to wreck me and I'm
Right.
still not going to do it correctly. So then I say, oh, for this thing, I can ask for help.
Okay.
For this thing, I can hire someone or ask my friend who's really good at figuring out this particular type of computer program,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So I do get help, but I first try to do it. I first try to engage it. And that also helps because then I know what to ask for,
Okay.
right? If I'm curious from the get-go, then when I figure out I do need help, I know what kind of help I need.
Right. Right. Okay. Because the help is filling in those gaps with that
Exactly.
you left along the way. So I'm curious about one of the things in the description you had sent me about the mindset was the multiple streams of income. So you mentioned earlier, you do have a contract or multiple contracts with different publishers, but you
Yeah.
also indie publish. So you've kind of embraced both sides, but you're probably exploring other revenues for income, right?
Oh, definitely. So direct sales are great. I mean, Kickstarter has been a huge boon for my career.
Right.
I am building still a terrific audience there. So the Midlist Indie Author podcast campaign will be my 10th Kickstarter
So
campaign.
your 10th campaign.
Yeah, in
You
three
were
years.
wow. How did I miss most of those? Because I seem to remember Patreon was one of the platforms you were engaged
Yes,
in,
so
right?
Patreon is another one, and Patreon has been my steadiest income source for almost a decade now.
10 years of see, I love to hear that. It's not this get rich quick scheme. It's
No,
long-term income earning, right?
Yeah. And in the Midlist Mindset book, I talk about the slow build.
Right.
And the slow build is what has worked for me, right? None of the get rich quick, spike your income, spike your sales, spike your
Right.
readership stuff. None of those techniques worked well for me.
Okay.
What worked for me was figuring out, oh, how do I build my garden so that I have an ecosystem that and a habitat that is self-sustaining and everything feeds everything else, right?
Right.
So I've got my Patreon, I've got Kickstarter, I'm building out my Shopify store,
Yeah.
I have a YouTube channel, I have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter that some people give me money for. I say it's free, and people say, great, here's money,
Thank you. Oh, wow. I love
right?
that. And the volunteer. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another stream of income that is steady, right? So Patreon and my newsletter are my steadiest stream of income that
Right.
I can build everything else on. So my wide book sales on all the retailers can go up and down without me having to worry about it. And then Kickstarter rounds all of that out,
Okay.
right? And other streams of income I'm exploring now are licensing foreign rights to foreign publishers,
Right. Right.
because I thought, well, a lot of authors do their own translations, they hire translators, they figure out how to publish in these various countries. I currently don't have the time and energy and attention to devote to that. So what am I going to do? Oh, this lawyer I worked with to look at some old contracts also deals with foreign rights. I'm
Oh,
just going
wow.
to say, here's my books. If you can sell any of them, I'll give you a percentage. Because paying a lawyer that percentage is worth it to me because I don't currently have the bandwidth to do that work.
Right.
One difference in having an agent or a representative represent you in like New York, US type publishing is that's eternal. They
Yeah.
become the agent of record
Yes.
and all your rights go away. Foreign rights are a 5 to 7 year contract.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
It's a limited contract, which is why I'm willing to do that. And
Okay.
I'm also talking to the same person about film and streaming rights,
And this
right?
is an IP lawyer, right?
This is an IP lawyer. They're an entertainment only lawyer. They've worked in Hollywood for years. They understand intellectual property. And so I trust them. So I'm expanding into those avenues as well by asking for help from someone who knows what they're doing, whom
Right.
I trust to have a decent contract, right?
Wow. That's amazing. So I'm fascinated by the title because I love the title. One of the things I love about it is you're not grandiose. You're not making it a grandiose thing.
Right.
Grandiose. I need my
Grandiose is how we say it in the US.
that's Canadian. Yes, yes, Thorn. That's Canadian that I'm speaking. No, I just don't know what I'm saying. That's the reality. So a lot of authors would say the bestseller mindset or the world's 7-figure author, et cetera, et cetera. But you're taking it to a more realistic, a very realistic expectation. I'm curious about your decision for that title because yes, you want to be honest and authentic, but what were some of the considerations around using that title, Midlist?
So there are books for bare beginners who aren't making any money, and then there are books promising the 6 to 7 figures,
Right.
right? I haven't found a middle ground in writing business books. So that was part of it. But the other part was most people would be happy making a middle class living. And it's just a lot more possible, right? And you can do it with the slow build. You can do it by adding one stream of income at a time. You can do it by adjusting your mindset month by month and exploring what mindset shifts you need to make in order to foster success, right? So I thought the old school midlist comes from traditional publishing. You had your mega bestsellers that paid for most of the books, including the books that made no money, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to be a bestseller, but there was this thing called the midlist, which were just your bread and butter writers. They steadily produced books. They were popular enough. They made a decent middle class living off what they called their backlist. We would just call it a catalog.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just year after year after year, they supported themselves and their families.
Hmm.
And I thought, that's what I want. I don't need to, sure, it would be awesome if Netflix wanted to buy one of my series and I sold 1 million books, right?
Yeah.
That's hopefully still on the table. But what I really want is just to be able to make a middle class living. And so becoming a midlist author, it's also a different mindset. It's saying, I just want to build this slow, steady, long term career that's sustainable, that's not going to burn me out, that I can do under various conditions. And mostly what is required is write the next book, right? Build up your catalog slowly. Like I have friends who are building up their catalog and selling some books and running a Kickstarter here and there. But mostly what they're doing is building up a catalog so when they retire, they
Uh,
can leverage that catalog as part of their retirement plan.
right.
Right. That's also a mid-list attitude. It's like just it's practical.
Mm.
What is practical for my life? Not what is this seven-figure author doing? And
Yeah.
how can I, recreate their template, which is going to be impossible
Yeah.
because my career is never going to be their career.
Yeah.
Right. So I want more people to embrace the mid-list attitude.
Oh, awesome. Were there any roadblocks that you had to stumble through, across, over, around, dig, under, whatever, blow away, to getting to that mindset, that sort of long-term mindset?
Yeah. I mean, I think most people are impatient at first. I am certainly a highly impatient person. And also, I came out of a career where, I was traveling the world, teaching people all over, you know, running workshops, doing conferences, and I was ambitious, right? Well, then my health tanked, right? My chronic illness that had been undiagnosed for 20 years said, I'm laying you flat on the couch now,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I had to figure out what I could do, right? At the time, I was still trying to study some of those get rich quick, spend $1 million on ads, cost, pay per click ads, etc. Figuring out none of it worked. My health was getting worse. So I had to retrench and adjust my attitude. So that was one roadblock. One roadblock was my personal conditions, right?
Right.
Another roadblock was the pervasive attitude in the indie author community at the time, which was not about longevity. It was all about chasing the spikes of income. And it wasn't even about reaching readers. It was about chasing the spikes of income.
Right.
Right. Christine Catherine Rush says, we build our audience one reader at a time. And that's when I said, oh, actually, marketing for me is about connection. So, how do I connect with readers?
Right.
How do I connect with my audience? One reader at a time, a handful of readers at a time, 100 readers at a time, right? And wow, turns out that sows goodwill. That means people give me money for my newsletter. They support my Patreon every month. They share my Kickstarters when they come out. They back every Kickstarter, right? Because I've built up rapport and
Right.
connection over time. People used to say to me, well, does social media sell books? And I'm like, that's the wrong question. Social media is one way of building connection. My weekly newsletter builds connection. So that means over time, yes, it sells books. Of course it does. But it's not a metric I can track. It's a complete attitude change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's what I call a possibility mindset. It's not a defeatist mindset and it's not a rigid mindset. It's like, what is possible here if I experiment and try these things?
Mm. I love that. I love that. So the Kickstarter's coming in middle of April
Yeah,
2024.
so April 16th through May 7th.
through May 7th. Can you, are you willing to share a little bit about how the Kickstarter is structured, and what are some of the reward? I mean, I'm assuming one of the rewards is we get access to the book earlier than regular
Yes.
retail, right? Okay.
Yeah. So you'll get access to the book probably 6 months in advance
Ooh, okay.
from retail. Yeah. So there'll be ebooks, print books available. I'll also have one-on-one coaching calls
Okay.
available, different things like that. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And it's launching on April 16th. So this episode should be going live just prior to that, so people can
Perfect.
go check it out. But there is a link right
And
now so
people
people
can,
can
yeah, there's
follow,
a
right?
link that people can follow and get an alert from Kickstarter when it goes live.
Okay, cool. There will be links to that in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. I want to go back a little bit to your fiction. I'm excited about this book. I'm eager to check it out and be one of your first supporters and get my hands on a print copy. Gosh darn early, which is so exciting. So you talked about paranormal cozy mysteries of what you're writing now, but I remember The Witches of Portland, and you had other paranormal series. Do you still have? Are they all ongoing, or have you closed some of the series and moved on to others?
So Witches of Portland is a complete 9-book
It,
series.
it's completed now. Okay.
Yeah. You know, if I'm ever inspired, I might do an offshoot series. And
Okay.
people ask me, people are like, when are you going to write more? And I'm like, well, it was planned as a 9-book series. I wrote the 9-book series.
Right.
You know, each witch in the coven gets their own book.
Okay.
That's how it worked. It's a 9-member coven. The Steel Clan Saga is a trilogy, 3 books, action adventure, future fantasy with motorcycle riding anarchist knights with swords and dragons, and you know, it's just wish fulfillment for me.
Yeah.
And that also is complete as a trilogy.
Okay.
And that's another one where I have a second generation in the back of my head. If I ever get
Right.
to it, I may not. I've also written, they're just coming out now into retailers. I've written 2 cozy fantasy novellas called The Mouse Thief.
Oh.
It's about a mouse who wears a highwayman's coat, and he works, it's kind of like, I call it Leverage meets Legends and Lattes. So Leverage is the heist caper. You know, the good guys win. They're taking down bad people as a
Right.
group of misfits. And so it's a really fun thing that I really enjoyed writing. And then I have 2 cozy paranormal series. Those are both ongoing. So
Okay.
the Seashell Cove series, which starts with Bookshop Witch, which is a fictionalized town, it's a fictionalized version of Lincoln City on the Oregon coast.
Oh.
And it's just bonkers.
Which is it of a specific bookshop in Lincoln City that's
Well, it's
based on
loosely based on Bob's
Bob's
books,
Beach Books? Awesome. Okay.
Bob's Beach books, except of course I make changes, you
Of
know.
course you have to, because I mean it's a
Yeah.
small location. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of hidden
Yeah.
alcoves and stuff.
But you'll recognize like the dinosaur store is in it and
Okay.
different things like that, right? So
Okay.
that's a totally bonkers paranormal cozy mystery with a wide cast of recurring characters, including gnomes and a cat and the bookshop witch and her D&D playing boyfriend, and
Oh.
centaurs and gnomes and all sorts of creatures. And then my second ongoing paranormal cozy series is called Pride Street, and it's got 2 corgis. So it's got a corgi detective and a trans gay man detective. So it's 2 men and 2 dogs in this little village within the city of Portland called Pride Street. And there's a leather daddy ghost who lives in their house, who lived there in the 80s. He was an AIDS activist. And it's like, wow, your household is very different than it was in the 80s when it was filled with my friends. You know, here
Yeah.
you are, this domestic couple. So that's also ongoing, which is a really fun series. I really enjoy writing from a corgi's point of view.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Or other animals.
Yeah.
So, are any of these books available in audio?
I have a few available in AI audio on Google Play. I'm working on audio. You know, audio is really an accessibility issue for me, I recognize.
Yeah.
But to put my entire catalog in audio is very daunting and very expensive. You know, if
Right.
I had a few books, I would just pay to hire a voice actor and have it
You have a
done.
lot. You have a lot.
I have a big catalog, and so I'm looking at, do I do voice cloning with 11 Labs? Do I clone my own voice to narrate my books? Do I hire a voice actor for only a few? I'm still working on audio.
Yeah, it's a
And
long. I
it's,
think it's a long term, and it's very expensive. That it takes a long time to pay for itself. I got lucky with a couple promotions, thank goodness, because
yeah,
otherwise it's like you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars of
tens of
investment.
thousands of dollars that I may not make back,
Yeah, yeah, for a
right?
long time. Yeah,
Because audio, of course, is fast growing, but it's still a tiny portion of the market.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Short fiction. You're still writing regularly, writing short fiction, selling
I don't
stories.
I don't write as much short fiction as I used to. The novels kind of took
Yeah,
precedence, but I do still write several short stories a year, and I do sell them to various anthologies,
yeah.
or I put them in my own collections. I actually just did a Kickstarter of a collection of 3 short story books,
Oh,
which
cool.
was really fun. Yeah.
Oh man, that is really, really fun. And so for anyone who is listening, where can they find out more about you, your fiction, your nonfiction? Is it all in a similar location?
Thorncoyle.com.
Thorncoyle.com is where people can find that. That's awesome. All right, so as we get close to the end and we start to wrap up, what's one bit of advice that you would love to, share with other writers? Maybe something that you would hope they know or wish they could walk away knowing.
The successful indie author doesn't give up.
Okay.
That's the main thing, right? So keep finding ways to re-engage. Keep finding ways to light your own fire. What makes you curious? What feels possible to you? When you feel like you're getting bogged down by all the work you have to do, or you're blocked because your perfectionist is, speaking too loudly, just take a breath, recenter, and say, what's interesting to me today? What's possible? And move from there.
Oh, you have just re-inspired me in the middle of a pretty hard day. So thank you for that one. You didn't even realize that you were going to help me right there, did you?
Well, you've helped me a lot in the past, Mark, which I mentioned in the book, and I appreciate you. So glad to be able to pass that along
Oh, well,
back.
that was awesome. Well, thank you, Thorn, for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. Always lovely to see you.
So, just a few things to reflect on here is, and this is sort of a pseudo quote from the interview with Thorn, when Thorn said, something that is sustainable long term and is not going to burn me out. Now, that's what they were looking for. And I recognize that. Like, I resemble that remark. I remember feeling very similarly when I was looking at, trying to follow, some of the common wisdom of the common advice of the gurus and the things you need to do and have to do, and it not fitting. And that's okay, because the other thing that they said was, what is practical for my life? And just like Thorn so brilliantly said, does social media sell books? Well, that's the wrong question to ask. In a very similar vein, the right question to also ask when you're looking at goals and when you're looking at the things to do to fit in with your life, when you're curious about exploring that, is asking that question, what is practical for my life? Meaning practical and realistic based on who you are, what you love, what you're not so fond of doing, the things you're good at, the things you're not necessarily good at. How do you fit it in a way that's practical? And again, goes back to that. Is this something that you can sustain? Is it something you want to sustain? Is this something that's going to be long-term? And is this something, and I think this is the thing we always often forget about, is this something that's not going to burn me out? Is this something that I'm going to be able to do because it's enjoyable, etc.? The other thing to reflect on, again, just such great wisdom. I always walk away from conversations with Thorn, thinking deeply, and I love that. But I love the way Thorn says, keep finding ways to engage. looking for ways to engage, finding things that are interesting or curious or possible for you today. Again, not just things you're interested in, but things that are also possible. Yeah, I'm interested in being bit by a radioactive spider and climbing the walls and having Spider-Man superpowers. I'm interested in that, but that's not quite very, very possible for me. So, balancing the realism with the things that are interesting and curious. Like, I'm interested and curious. I'll go back to a perfect example. I was interested and curious. Well, I came up with the title, Only Monsters in the Building. Wouldn't it be neat to do a mystery? I realized the mystery I wrote wasn't, I wanted it to be a closed room mystery or a locked room mystery, and I realized that's not what I was writing. I realized probably about halfway through the book, I was writing a mystery where Michael was exploring why he's so screwed up. Like, why is he so flawed? Why does he have all of these issues? Because he's been burying them and repressing a lot of those things. So the mystery was really, yes, there's an external mystery. There is the murder to solve, but the real mystery was probing into his head. And so that book was an interesting exercise for me as a writer. I was interested in wanting to explore other paranormal creatures, particularly ones who were messed up like Michael. So the vegan vampire, or the mermaid who ends up repelling people rather than attracting them, and why that was. I mean, I just had so much fun with it. But so when I was thinking about that, I realized that I was interested and I was curious to explore this aspect of a character that I really care about and the universe I've created for him. But it wasn't possible for me once I got into it. It wasn't possible for me to actually write it as a locked room mystery. And it wasn't until I was in the throes of it. Again, it wasn't until I was crossing that bridge that I was burning it behind me. I mean, it's the old expressions that I like to bastardize and mix up. We'll burn that bridge as we're crossing it. But cross that bridge when we get to it. But that's kind of the way I like to explore things as a discovery writer. I sometimes have an idea, and I go, and halfway there, I realize I'm going to go somewhere else. And it's one of the things I also love so much about when I explore with Liz, when the two of us travel together. We travel together so well because we may have a plan, and the plan may be, all right, we're going to go here and here and here and here and here. And then in the middle of doing the thing, something comes up, and we divert from the plan. And we're both okay with that. We're both okay with the journey, let's just enjoy the journey rather than whatever that destination was, because the destination is where we are right now, and we're loving it. And I think I can do that when I'm exploring very, very well. I have to remind myself, which is why it's great to talk to people like Thorn. I have to remind myself about those values of finding things that are interesting or curious, because I do it naturally. Why do I turn that off when I sit down to write? Why do I not do the same sort of thing? And again, I'm so looking forward to reading this book that Thorn has coming out. Again, I'm recording this on the 18th of April, 2024. So if you're not listening to this in the distant future, you still have an opportunity to go to Thorn's website, check it out. I will have a link at starkreflections.ca to the Kickstarter for the Indie Author Midlist Author. I'm messing up the title. I'm going to try again. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it. This is for the Kickstarter for the Midlist Indie Author Mindset with T Thorn Coyle. I want to thank Thorn for being such a great guest. I want to thank you, dear listener, for listening. If you want to support the podcast, you can leave a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. Better yet, share this podcast with somebody that you think may enjoy these stark reflections. So until next week, and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove,
was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.